Well, hello everyone. I hope you're all okay. I hope you're finding things to do and keeping well and doing lots of music. Welcome to this first film in my little series talking about pieces that we're hopefully going to do with HSO over the coming years. This first one's going to be on Beethoven's Sixth Symphony that we've got programmed for the autumn, the Pastoral Symphony. I'm going to talk a little bit about the construction of it, how it's made, why it's such a great piece. Rachel's going to do a couple of videos talking about the technical issues that some of the string parts have in them that you'll encounter when we learn it. I'd thoroughly recommend downloading the part from IMSLP. That's all there, and also think about playing along to either the CD or, even better, the perfect thing to do is to play along to one of the films on the digital console of the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. There's some fantastic performances, a couple by Rattle, one by Abardo, but my favourite one is the one with Bernard Haitink. It's such a great performance. It's really, really satisfactory. So it'd be a lovely thing to do, just have your music there and play along. You just feel you're in the orchestra yourselves. Anyway, before I talk about the symphony itself, I'm just going to give a little bit of a preamble as to where we're at in terms of the symphony when Beethoven was writing. The symphony kind of started as the first stirrings of what we know as the symphony started to come together in about 1730, 1740, 1750. And gradually this kind of idea that the symphony was going to be a four-movement piece with a first movement, a slow movement, like a dance, minuet, scherzo, a third movement and a finale, gradually came together. There were many different ones. Haydn wrote sometimes a first movement that was a slow movement, sometimes just three movements, sometimes more movements, six movements. But the standard way tends to be this four-movement design. Beethoven follows that design. The thing that drives most of the movements in a symphony is what we call sonata form. Certainly first movements nearly all the time. Sonata form drives the first movement, if not the slow movement, and the finales as well. Certainly in the Pastoral Symphony, the first movement and the second movement is sonata form. Most of the previous symphonies use this, so it's worth just going over what sonata form is. Sonata form, as we know, the textbook way is to have what we call the first section is called the exposition, then we have the development section, and then we have the recapitulation, and sometimes a little coda at the end, signing off, which sometimes was short, but with Beethoven was made to be another dramatic section. The exposition, where all the material is first laid out, the textbook will tell us that it starts off in a tonic and a key is established. Einaklang music, so it's definitely established that we're in G major. The Eroica Symphony. So we're definitely in the key of the piece. That was E flat. So we have our first section, first material, and then eventually we'll go towards the dominant key as a contrast, and the music will be slightly different. Sometimes, if it's been lively to start with, it's less lively, more lyrical, and it's in the dominant key, and we stay in the dominant to get to the end of the exposition. So we've gone into a different room of the house, if you like. Then we have a development section which will jazz around all the bits that we've got in the exposition, maybe put two of the tunes together, maybe try some of the tunes that we've got in the major key, we'll put them in a minor key, explore some orchestration, explore some key relationships, and eventually we get to the recapitulation, which is the exposition repeated, but all in the tonic key, so the second subject is still in the tonic. That will encourage some chord changes, and there'll always be a little bit of difference. So there's always differences coming through the whole movement, and it makes a kind of satisfactory, certainly 10-minute, if not 15-minute, if not 20-minute piece, and we can keep the interest for the audience over a long period. When we get to Mahler, the second symphony of Mahler, the first movement is probably about 25 minutes, maybe 20 minutes, 25. This is sonata form, but there's so much variety in it, and so much exploration of the material that we can make this to be satisfactory for a long time. The Fifth Symphony of Beethoven was another one where there's an amazing drama unfolds throughout the first movement, with this insistent rhythm, insistent keys. You never really know where you are. It's really unsettling, the keys that he lands on, where you think you've got, you haven't got to. There's diminished seventh chords, which are kind of terrifying. But eventually, when we get to the end, we kind of know we've got to the end, and it feels like we've gone through a big psychological journey, a bit of turmoil, and come out the other end okay. With the Fifth Symphony, that turmoil lasts for the whole of the piece, and eventually, when we get to the end, this turmoil is resolved by this kind of arrival of C major rather than C minor. So we can get becomes a really dramatic form from 1730, when it was quite simple, 1740 to 80 years later, as this amazing tool to keep people really interested for the whole of the performance. The Sixth Symphony of Beethoven, though, doesn't take advantage of any of that at all. It's an amazing piece that with this dramatic form that Beethoven created, he does completely the opposite, and keeps the listener interested for all that time. There are a couple of ways he does it. One is to keep this narrative going about the countryside. Now, the countryside to Beethoven was a very important thing for him. His deafness was getting really acute by 1808 when this was written. He noticed his deafness coming on about 6-7 years before, and he was really struggling in himself. Really took himself away from society. Didn't really want to talk to people. Much preferred being on his own. And would go for very long country walks, and he said it was the only time he really felt as though he was settled and comfortable. So if you're going to write a piece under those conditions about the countryside, you don't want to have too much conflict, just to reflect the effect that it has on your spirit. The subtitle of the Pastoral Symphony is Recollections of Country Life. We could kind of say it's like a day out in the country. The first movement is called Awakening of Happy Feelings on Arrival in the Countryside. So it's like going out of the town, going into the woods, having the calmness come upon you. Second movement is Seen by the Brook, so it's almost as if you just found a little river. You can sit down, have your sandwich, have a little bit of a rest, take in the view. Walk a little bit further, you come to the third movement, which is merrymaking by some villagers in a local pub, playing a few tunes, having a dance. Then you just start walking along again. A storm, you're caught in a storm with all the rain and the thunder, and then eventually the storm abates, and you're thankful that it's all over and you can dry off, and you wander home, and at the very end there's this lovely little muted horn bit in the distance. You can hear what you've just left behind. Beethoven was quite insistent that it wasn't a painting that he was trying to do, but just a description of feeling. So there's no specific action, particularly, but there is in the storm, obviously, but mostly there's no action. We can't really tell what's particularly going on. Berlioz tried to do it, but it doesn't really fit. There's a lovely story about La Mer, Debussy's La Mer, the first movement of which is called From Dawn to Midday at Sea. And his great mate Eric Satie listened to it, and he said, I particularly like the bit at 11:15. It's not quite relevant for Debussy either, but you can kind of see what he means, and so it's very tempting to kind of say, oh yeah, this is the moment where the sandwich is eaten, this is the moment where you look at it, you see a deer walking in the forest, this is the moment where the band have had a rest. Some people speak of the slow movement as being a moment where Beethoven's hearing problems can be spotted. He's obviously having a discussion about his hearing problems and how it's affecting him. This is kind of speculation, really. It just works so beautifully as a musical form. So we don't have very much pictorial program music in it. So movement number 1, the awakening of happy feelings as we come into the countryside. We start off with what we know as like the bagpipe sound, open C and the violas, so it's very raw, very rural, very bucolic, and a fantastic little tune. Beautiful, and has a lovely kind of sound to it, lovely calmness, and the whole of the exposition, the bit I was going to say sets up all the ideas, hardly moves away from three chords: the tonic chord of F, the subdominant chord B flat, and the dominant chord of C. There are just kind of ways of getting to these keys, particularly to get to the dominant. We have to have another couple of other keys, but it doesn't do anything dramatic at all. There's only one moment of a minor chord in it. It just comes a little bit after letter A, I think. It's a D minor chord. But it's really there just to help you get into the dominant. So there's no tension, there's no sad stuff. Beethoven, there was a little bit of a suggestion that maybe it was obvious that the minor chord to Beethoven and other composers obviously started to have a more depth of feeling. So it's quite noticeable that he's trying to avoid every mention of the minor chord. Anyway, there's some great tunes to be had, some lovely moments. One thing that is very notable at the beginning is the sense of just sticking on a chord and not moving from it. About 10 bars in, you'll remember this bit. Goes on and on and on without moving. It's very relevant to what comes up a little bit later on. And so there was a lot of things just on the tonic and the dominant. Doesn't really move, doesn't do anything exciting. There's a lot of rhythmic energy with the tune that kind of keeps the interest up, but harmonically speaking, it's very calm. When we get to the development section, the bit where keys can be explored, conflict can be encouraged, and things can be put together in odd ways, he doesn't do it here either. We start off in the key. We finished in the dominant in C, but we pretty much immediately go back to F, and F then takes us to B flat, the subdominant, and we have in the violins, in the cellos and violas, and like that bit I played at the opening, it just stays exactly the same. There's triplets against quavers and semiquavers, so there's a rhythmic energy going on, but harmonically speaking it's very, very static. And we stay like that for 12 bars in B flat, and then without any preparation at all we suddenly go to D major. This is a bit of an odd key to go to, because it's not particularly related to either B flat or F. And in normal circumstances, you would prepare it by going via dominance and dominance of dominance, and there was methodologies to get there. But you just go there. It sounds like the sun coming up. It's a beautiful thing, as if when you're sitting eating your sandwich, suddenly the sun comes up over on some trees over there, and you think, "Whoa, man, fantastic!" Anyway, the development's still got time to get some conflict and some drama, but oh no. We're now in D, and D can be the dominant to take us to G. Very straightforward harmonic changes, and we do exactly the same thing. Exactly the same thing with the in the violins, and we sit in that G, and eventually we do exactly the same thing, go to a completely unrelated chord, but this time instead of going up a major third, we go down a minor third from G, we go to E. Again, it's like seeing the sun over there and then looking over in that direction and thinking, wow, something even more beautiful. No conflict, complete calm, but we have gone to some very interesting key area. Now, we're now in the key of E, which is quite a long way away from F. Now, anyone who plays the organ or has done just basic keyboard harmony, the way to get back to F, the quickest way, is just by a cycle of fifths. eventually get there. And this is pretty much what Beethoven does. Very unconflicted, so very easy to get from E to F. If you want to do drama, you can go via all sorts of keys, but this is just super calm, going to a strange key and coming back. There's one moment of slight darkness in the development section. This is just before letter F. We'll have I'll do that again, sorry. So when it sounds as though it's a little bit tense and a little bit dark, we move away from the problem as quick as possible. All in all, a very beautiful movement. Doesn't really go very much harmonically, but it's just calm and beautiful. There's nothing particularly problematic. There's a couple of lovely little solos in the winds that were worth looking at, just like 2-bar solos. There's a lovely bit of clarinet at the end, a very, very jolly, country-ish, jaunty little tune. But nothing particularly much to make our blood pressure go up. So, second movement, we have a scene by the brook where we sit down and have our sandwiches. The people say that this is the sound of the water. Not totally sure about that, but it's a little bit more watery later on when we get semiquavers. A bit more active. The very interesting orchestration thing here is the cellos are divided up into the front two players are separate from the rest of the players who play with the basses. So there's quite tricky stuff for front desk cellos. That was a later addition that Beethoven put in. Obviously, from the first performance, it was a little bit thick and a little bit heavy, so he just kind of lightened it up a little bit. And it is quite notorious to try and keep the sound not muddy. The tune that we have on top is a lovely tune. Sorry about my duff piano playing, but it gives an idea of how it goes. Worth listening to it all, because a sonata design would sometimes take that apart and explore separate bits of that tune, but with this he doesn't at all. He just does repeats of the tune in different keys later on, but verbatim, so the tune's pretty much exactly the same. Few flowery bits, but it's the same, always the same length. We have a similar kind of thing in the second movement of going to new keys. In the second subject, we have the lovely tune. We go to A, so we're basically in B flat and we've gone to A major, but again, getting back from A major, it's very easy to get back to our tonic, and you have this known the world over as a just kind of filling in, vamping kind of set of chords, but very, very beautiful, very calm, lovely movement. When we get to the development, very similar things happen in the development that happened in the first movement. We go to unexpected keys, but in a very, very calm kind of way. The first little bit, we end up in the key of the second movement is in B flat, so the dominant key is F major. So we end up in the dominant at the end of the exposition. We then very quickly go into G major, which is not so far away, kind of far away, but no drama. And we have the first of two statements of the tune, one by the flute and the oboe who play together in the key of G, and then we have a lovely transition and we go to E flat, and we go to E flat major for the clarinet solo. So we've gone to G major and E flat. This is quite a long way away from where we're going. So it's an exploration of keys, but done in a very, very gentle way. And then towards the end of the clarinet solo, we have a transition that takes us to G flat major, which is a very, very long way away. The relationship between B flat on tonic, it's a major third below. There's no big deal about that, especially the main means of getting there is very easily done. And then eventually we go to C flat major, which is B major, a cadence in B major, and then E minor. All keys that are a little bit unusual, but it's done in such a calm way. This is all relevant to what's coming up in a little bit later on. We've gone through all these, explored these keys, but as if there's no big conflict between them. And eventually we come to the recapitulation. The music's exactly the same, and at the very end we have this great moment that Beethoven wrote in. The bird names, the nightingale, the quail and the cuckoo. So there's him saying, oh, this is not about painting, and he paints a few birds. There's the nightingale. I hope you recognise it as a nightingale. That's the nightingale, as we all know. The quail is the oboe, and obviously the cuckoo is the clarinet. And this feels just like a little cadenza at the end of a concerto. The third movement is entitled The Merry Gathering of the Country People. The scherzo movement, which is going to be quite a fast dance movement. And again, it follows the same format. We have a lovely key. What you probably don't realise is we start in F, and within 8 bars we've gone to D major. We're so used to these sudden changes now, being calm and being undramatic, that he can exploit that to his heart's content. It's a great movement, nothing particularly hard. It goes fast. It's got to be light and airy mostly, but it's got this fantastic energy eventually. Really lively, really jolly, and it leads into a very notoriously funny section where the oboe player, supposedly, this is a kind of Beethoven gag, the oboe player coming a couple of beats late from what's supposed to happen. So theoretically, you have strings. Of course, that doesn't happen in the real piece. The oboe comes in a couple of bars late and corrects. So we get. We never have it in HSO where people come in a couple of beats late, so the gag is quite funny. There's also a funny moment with a second bassoon who can only play 3 notes. That's the only notes that the bassoon plays. The second bassoon plays in this little bit. In the original parts, Beethoven put it in second bassoon and cued it in for the first part, just in case the second bassoon is messed up. Again, that would never happen in HSO. We have a kind of trio section in the middle, which just is basically a 2-chord trick between the very much, but it just sounds like a little kind of common garden dance band. Again, nothing much happens except lots and lots of energy. First appearance of the trumpets is a very notable thing here. They don't make a great big show of themselves in their arrival, but they're certainly there, and there's just one big long held note for the trumpets. Scherzo follows the same format as normally, so we have scherzo, trio, and then scherzo again, and when the scherzo-y bit comes back, it comes faster and faster and more furious. And at the end of the scherzo, still we've had not very much drama, we've just had pleasantness. We get a D flat. Now, this is where the storm starts, and this is where drama happens. We've had a relationship of going from the tonic to a chord, a major third below. In the slow mo we have G major to E flat major. So this isn't particularly special, but in those previous times that kind of a juxtaposition's happened, there's been preparation by a cycle of fifths and preparation of the chords. To have that chord out of nothing is a little bit unusual. It is also the only time every other key we've gone through every other key throughout the piece. Even B major we've had a cadence in B major. The only key we haven't had a cadence in so far is D flat. So if you want to bring some drama in, D flat is your only choice. And this is the thunder in the background, and we have the most fantastically conflicted, dramatic storm music. No one's ever really got anywhere close to getting a storm as exciting as this. Now all these keys that have been missed out in previous movements have just been put into the same pot. Incredibly dramatic. In amongst that we obviously have the thunder with the cellos. This is obviously very easy to play on the piano because I've got 5 fingers, groups of 5, and the basses have groups of 4. Easy on the piano, but I think it's not very easy at all on the cello because you haven't got enough fingers to do it. So that's a little bit to be looking into. It is an effect, so we don't have to be so accurate, but it's the effect has got to be incredibly dramatic. We also have lightning from the strings, which will come a little bit obviously a little bit later on. But the power of this thing and the movement of the chords and all these diminished seventh chords, really, really dramatic. A little bit later on we have little flashes of thunder. Drama. We also have rain coming down, not so effective on the piano. The strings is all the kind of rain coming down. We have the introduction of the piccolo, which makes things a little bit dramatic. And then horror of horrors, at the biggest moment, the biggest climax, the introduction of the trombones and the timps. Now, the first moment in symphonic history, the first appearance of the trombone is the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven. But I suppose in real life, in that first performance, the Sixth Symphony was at the beginning of the concert, so it was the first time that trombone had been used in a symphony movement. What a place to do it. I mean, there is drama, and it comes in the same moment as the timps, and there's this almighty wallopy chord where the top of the storm happens, and it is the kind of the beginning of the dissolving of all the energy has kind of dropped away, and we get to the end of the movement. Few rumbles in the kind of distant thunder in the cellos and the basses. Few little wisps of lightning in the distance. So. Just basic, so you can hardly hear the pitches they're doing. A lovely little calm little bit, and a solo flute takes us into the last movement, which starts off with the same interval that we started with. This time in C. This is the first movement had F and C, but this last movement we have a C, open string violas, starting with the clarinet. One of the great tunes of all time. And we go back to the format of previous movements. The tune is repeated exactly the same 3 times. This is kind of a rondo, but it's also got connections with sonata form, as rondos often had. So it has this kind of key relationship thing. But like the first movement, the second movement doesn't really go around too much. There's some nice running semiquavers for the strings to look into, just to know where you're going and to feel comfortable with it. And then we eventually come to the coda at the very end. The cellos start with the bassoon. The first statement is nice and straightforward. The second statement is with semiquavers, so that's a little bit tricky. But it leads us on to the most wonderful climax of chords. Again, not conflicted, it just kind of grows and grows and grows, and then relaxes down. Down we go. And eventually we have this absolutely luscious little hymn that the shepherd, to thank the Godhead, as the text that Beethoven wrote, to thank the Godhead for releasing us all from the terrible storm. That's exactly what we're going to be thinking after this blinking lockdown has come to a close. Absolutely lovely. After all that conflict of the storm, a lovely thanks be to God, and just a couple of loud chords at the end and a distant horn in the background just to remind us where we've been, and we get to the close of one of the great symphonies of all time. Such a beautiful piece. Amazing how an interest and a kind of it's not a tension thing, but you just feel you want to be in the piece for the whole of the time. It's a lovely kind of crest of a wave that you can be taken on. It's really amazing. Happy learning, happy playing, happy listening. I hope you enjoy getting to know it. I hope you enjoy getting to play it, especially with the Berlin Philharmonic Orchestra. That's a really special thing to do. Good. Hopefully see you next week. There'll be a little bit more about sonata form next week. Just as a heads up, it's going to be Nielsen's 5th Symphony, which is very Beethovenian. And takes key conflicts to a very extreme length. It's really hard, but I'm going to put it forward as one of the pieces that we should perhaps do, because it is one of the really great pieces of the 20th century. Great, happy practice, happy lockdown.